It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Won't you be mine? Won't you be mine? Oh, hi there, everybody. Good to see you. There's me. I can tilt this down. Yeah, it's good to be here. I've got 1 hour really before I need to clock in for my day of work, and excited to talk about loudness with you guys. G'day, Simon. We are going to be discussing loudness for film and TV today. I'm wearing a lav mic today. I just wanted to do something different. So if there's any issues with it, I kind of checked it out, but I can switch back to my large diaphragm condenser. Just let me know. But I've got like kind of a outline for what I'd like to talk about, and I need to go back through some comments for yesterday. Let me open up a new tab and go back to my YouTube and YouTube Studio, and then look at the comments. Okay, this is great. Yeah, some of these were really awesome. I'm actually going to look at the ones I responded to because they're really, there were some really good ideas. So we'll just jump right in here. Make sure everything looks like it's working. So loudness for film and TV. It is a very, it can be a very touchy subject for mixers. Maybe not so much sound editors, but re-recording mixers, because it's a mixture of technical things that we have to do, and there's the art of re-recording, mixing, and telling the story. So whether it's for a film or TV show or short film, maybe a podcast, like anything where you're mixing the audio for broadcast to the masses, you have to balance the user experience of being able to understand everything and get the story points and enjoy the storytelling that's going on. You have to balance that with the director's wishes for something to be exciting and impactful, and a lot of times that means dynamic range, being like, the exciting stuff is very loud and then the intimate stuff is very quiet. So there's understandably a lot of misunderstanding of how loud things need to be, and especially for like different formats and what's going on with the project. Maybe there's a lot of dialogue and there's not a lot of action, or the opposite could happen, or you could have a project that's mostly background ambience. So all those require different approaches for loudness. But the thing that we all need to keep in mind is that a lot of the projects are being consumed at home. They're being consumed on small screens. Really, they're big screens. It might be a 65-inch TV. But it's not the 1930s, like, well, let's all go down to the cinema hall and take in a picture. It's like, people are just consuming stuff at home. So my thoughts on loudness overall, with the huge dynamic range we have available to us, is to actually limit that and use it very specifically, and to not be beating people's eardrums up with loudness. And I am personally guilty of doing that. On, like, when I first started mixing, I wasn't confident, and I was kind of trusting the directors and producers to guide me, because I had just started mixing. So if they wanted something really loud, I would be like, sure, let's turn it up to 11. And there was actually, on one of the mixes I did, the reviews mentioned how loud it was in the theater and how it was like verging on painful. And my stomach sank when I read those, because like, you don't want that as a mixer. And I've been, subject to that. Like when I've watched I won't name the films, but some films there's just some really loud sequences, and it's like borderline abuse. So we're gonna dive in. Let me just go through the comments real quick. I think, is there anything bad? I can share this with you guys. So the little stars are like the members, which I try to focus on. Like, they're supporting the channel and they're kind of like, you know, bros and sisters to me. So I try to focus on their comments because they're like super invested in the channel. So let me go back. Okay. This is good. Neural says, will you be addressing mixing target levels that ensure compatibility across multiple delivery formats? I'm just going to copy that. And I've got about an hour, so I'm going to try to be succinct and not too rambly. So let me see. Clipping plugins. This is good. Okay, trim plugin, clip gain. Okay, this is good too. And then that's about EQ. Okay, this is good too. These are all really good questions. Okay, so let me just go through the comments now in the chat. Tenet was one that was too loud. Simon Benjamin says, I feel like John Wick's opening scene with the punches are one of our contemporary benchmarks for loudness. Yeah, so I didn't attend the mixes for that, but I did cut the production sound for, I think, about a third of the film. And then I went to go see it in a local theater, and it was like, the punches were loud, but they were succinct moments, like, you know, impact, tail, impact, tail. It wasn't like a sustained wall of sound. So that's a good example to me of like good, you know, good appropriate loudness. Okay. So, and if I missed one of your question, if I miss a question that you've put in a different video about loudness, because this is like a huge hot topic, just let me know, and I will try. I apologize if I miss it. I'm like doing my best here, but my memory's not that great. So, okay, the range issue. Yes. Okay, let me just type that into my little cheat sheet here. Loudness units, range. That's great. Okay, so I actually like thought about this video before doing it so I could be prepared. And let me, actually, you guys can see my cheat sheet. I don't know that you'll be able to read it. Maybe if I make it bigger and like zoom in or make the text bigger. Okay. So, film and TV loudness wars. First, let's look at the definition of LUFS. People have asked me that, like, what are LUFS? And so loudness K-weighted relative to full scale. LKFS. It used to be we would measure that, and now it seems like most people have switched over to just straight up LUFS, so without the K weighting. And there's different flavors of specification for loudness, but basically this is just a way to measure like the overall program level, the average level, not peak level, but like the sustained level of it. And there's different plugins that can help you measure this. If you have Pro Tools Ultimate, the Pro Limiter, excuse me, is great because you can see like this is just on my mic input, and the short term is pretty much close to spec. So I've got my gain staging good for broadcast. But this will give you short term and true peak. And then another one you can use is if you have Izotope Advanced, should be Soundfield Insight 2. Insight 2 uses a lot more CPU, but it also has all kinds of different things you can look at to impress your clients, and they'll be like, whoa, what an audio nerd you are. But this will give you like a history graph during playback and intelligibility and all kinds of different things. You can also change the target spec on here from like EBU R128 to ATSC 85 or Netflix spec. or BS 1772, 3, and 4, and I think they're even up to 5 now. I haven't updated Izotope for a while. I'm actually going to be doing a whole system upgrade soon. So yeah, those are 2 great plugins. And then the other one you can use, which I believe is free, is Julian Loudness Meter. There is a paid version of this, but and it should be able to do mono, right? It doesn't look like it works on an aux on input mode, so maybe just for playback, which I guess is fine. But this is great. It's a really lightweight plugin, really nice design, fantastic. Like, grab the free version of this if you don't have it, just for measuring loudness. And then in a program like DaVinci Resolve or Premiere, there's also loudness meters in there that you can use to kind of check where you're at. So the history of loudness is tied in with so cinema mixing. There's not really a spec other than you can't destroy the cinema equipment, and you basically mix and they make a DCP and then that goes to the theaters, and there's a QC process for things, but they don't really have a spec for you to hit. So if you're lucky enough to be mixing something for a theater, great. It's kind of the Wild West. Without the experience and the years of doing it and understanding what works and how cinemas are set up, you will probably need some guidance on what levels to have stuff. But every video I talk about mixing, I talk about the importance of room calibration and making sure either you have an app on your phone for measuring the C-weighted scale of Dolby pink noise coming out of Pro Tools through all 6 speakers. There's also, somewhere in my room here, I've got my trusty Radio Shack SPL meter that it's going to go to the grave with me. So calibrate your room. Make sure the speakers are full range. Make sure they're the right distance from you, the right distance from the wall. Check the room with a tool like Room EQ Wizard to see where the dips and peaks are, because that has a lot to do with perceived loudness. If you have a huge bump at 150 hertz, you're going to be mixing that frequency down when you're pre-dubbing dialogue. So make sure your room is flat, make sure it's quiet, and make sure that your monitors are calibrated to a level that suits your room. For my room, that's about 82 dB. When I'm dialogue editing, I will listen to 85 just because I want to hear more stuff that's down in the mud. For a really small room that's not like built to be a mixing room, 76 to 79 dB is generally going to be good. But set the level of your monitors so that the comfortable, yes, this is a comfortable mix, I'm proud of this mix, this sounds good, ends up being around -24. That's like the best advice I can give you. That might be a little too loud for a theatrical mix, but if you're doing a theatrical mix and you're doing it professionally, you're going to be taking it to a dub stage anyways. And know also that theaters aren't generally playing back at Dolby 7 anymore. Maybe for an initial screening of some festivals, the bigger festivals will do that if there's instructions from the director, like you have to play this back at 7. Some of the big tentpole blockbusters will say play this back at 7, and the projectionists are supposed to follow that. But the problem is that things are so damn loud that if you play it back at 7, the people are going to go to the theater owner and complain and say, this is too loud, there's blood spraying out of my ears, you need to turn it down. So a lot of theaters that I've found, and I've done like an informal survey where I call or go around and ask, like, what are you playing stuff? It's 4.5 to 5.5. That's kind of the range. And then for kid movies, they might even bring it down even lower because the kids are just hopped up on sugar, like crack cocaine, running around the theater, hanging off the walls. Like, they're really there just to play. So that's why I say set your room, calibrate the monitors so that -24 sounds comfortable. It's not too loud. And what that'll do then is the majority of the content that comes through your room, you're going to be mixing it to spec just based on the calibration of your speakers and not having to be a meter monkey and just like watching that line go up and down because that's not really artistic. So Simon says he's a cinema worker and confirms that they set the Dolby fader between 4.5 and 5.5. So that is, it's really because of what we're doing as mixers that this is happening. and the directors and producers, obviously. But so that is the importance of room calibration, the history of loudness. So I'm an older guy. I'm 38, and back in the day when I started, DVDs were huge, like DVDs and Blu-rays, and a lot of the work I did was for DVDs. It would be like special features or maybe a near field mix on a feature film for the DVD. That was just like a huge part of the revenue model for the film business. So we would mix the near field mix, and then we'd have to make an AC3 file, or the mastering house that put all the video and audio components together would make an AC3, and they would always ask us, what do we set the dial norm to? And dial norm is maybe something you guys haven't heard, but this is also a Wikipedia thing that I kind of put down. Dial norm is, it's a metadata parameter in the AC3 file that controls basically the playback normalization based on the average level of the dialogue. And the setting we would use for like, you know, playback my mix at the level I mixed at. In other words, don't touch the normalization, just play it back exactly how I mixed it, would be -31. So there would be no gain applied to the mix, and it would just play back at the level that we mixed at, because the standard back then was that the dialogue would average around -31. So there wouldn't do any compression or anything like that to the mix. If you set higher levels, then it would compress it to basically bring it into the spec of like where the other films that came through and they decided on these values were set, to try and get it close to you know, what everybody else was doing. So DVDs were great for that. And then, you know, they were pretty dynamic, but we would do a near field mix. So those were done in small rooms, and it benefited like everybody because the DVDs were going to a small screen. But what's happened now is you have all this streaming content, and it is being mixed in these huge dub stages with the director and producer who are probably used to mixing in a dub stage and maybe even used to mixing stuff for theater. And it's going through the whole chain of what normally happens, and it's too dynamic. And so people are sitting at home, me included, sitting at home and watching a show on Netflix or Amazon Prime or Hulu or Paramount Plus or whatever your 31 flavors is of streaming stuff. And I'm having to take this remote and remix the show while I watch it, especially if the kids are in bed. It's like, you know, 8:30 at night, we're watching a show. The dialogue is nice. I'm listening to the dialogue. It's great. Here comes some action. Well, I'm going to be Johnny on the spot with this volume on the remote. So I understand the desire to have things dynamic and big and exciting and have the director pushed back in their seat. And I, like I said, I've been guilty of making things too loud for the exciting moments. And it's just not, it's not good when people are having to either reach for the remote or enable an AI feature on their TV to remix this professionally mixed content for them. So my whole thing with loudness that we're going to be continuing to talk about is that I don't want things to ever require user input. I don't want them to have to reach for the remote. I don't want them to have to enable AI dialogue boost on Amazon. I want them to just sit for 44 minutes or 90 minutes or 22 minutes, whatever the length is, and just enjoy the story. Or if it's a documentary, enjoy the, it's still a story, but like just consume the content and not scrunch their nose up or cover their ears or say, huh, what did they say? So, and yeah, so that, like, I understand the art and the let's make this cinematic and let's make this really exciting for people, but at the same time, there's just the reality of people are not listening in a dub stage. So let's talk about how to make something meet a loudness spec or to be the right loudness, and kind of what I'm actually going to open. Let me make sure there's no weird stuff that you guys wouldn't want to see. Let's do Sketchpad IO. I really like Sketchpad because it just, you can draw stuff. This was a long time ago. How do I do a new one? Okay. So, make sure you guys can see this. No, you can't. Okay, Sketchpad IO. So, the gain staging for loudness really starts with clip gaining in Pro Tools. Let's go to the dialog. This is Family Heirloom. If you want to practice, you can grab this from my site, but if not, we can just check this out. Let's view the clip gain line. So I've already clip gained the crap out of this dialog to get it pretty close to the pocket of what I wanted this short film to be around -24, because that's kind of what I suggest for people to mix to. If you don't have a spec in front of you, just hit -24. It's going to translate across the most different formats possible if you just hit that broadcast spec of -24 LUFS for the whole program. So I've clip gained this to where the dialogue is pretty close to -27. When they're yelling, it's going to go up higher, especially with no compression, no plugins on. They might yell and it might go up to -14 or -12 maybe for like really short blips. And then when they're really softly speaking, it might go down to like -31. So the loudness range on the dialogue probably goes from about -31 up to -14. So it's a pretty big range. It's about 16 loudness units of range. So you can constrain that more if you want, but you have to balance the actor's performance and the noise floor of the recording with meeting your spec. And you just have to base that on each project. So I say for dialogue, when you're gain staging dialogue, try to get the whole program to average about -27. That is the Netflix spec for dialogue. They do a dialogue gated measurement of -27. I think it's K-weighted still, but it might be just LUFS. So put your meter on your submaster or your master output. It can even be a pro limiter just to save your ears, and just try to get this short-term number around -27. Now, scene by scene, that is going to vary a little bit, but please try to not have things be so dynamic that it's like a 20 dB spread. You want to constrain it, I would say less than 20 dB of dynamics on the dialogue, and really you want to get it closer to 12, just because dialogue is king. You want things to be intelligible, and you don't want people reaching for the remote or asking their spouse or friend that they're watching, what did they say, or having to, go back and rewind things. I'm just going to go through some comments real quick and see. Okay. There's a lot of comments, so I'm going to try to focus on member comments. Okay, range issue, yep. Okay, so clip gain your dialogue, clip gain your sound effects, clip gain the music even. A lot of the times the music from the composer comes in too hot because they're just mixing in a music room. So clip gain it to where stuff before you touch a fader is already pretty comfortable. And the benefit of that too is then as this dialogue or whatever you're clip gaining hits the plugins, it's going to be hitting them at a nice healthy level. You're not going to be clipping the input on Pro Q3. You're not going to be having to boost the output on the compressor 20 dB. And I've mixed dialogue edits where I had to boost the output or a trim 20 dB just to get it up close to where it needed to be. And the other downside of that is you're not going to be hearing the clicks and pops and room tone shifts in the dialogue because you're listening too quiet. You have to listen at a nice, healthy level, and stuff has to be clip gained so that you can hear all that stuff. So try to get the whole scene or the whole reel or the whole program to where the dialogue, in your dialogue edit, averages minus 27 LUFS. So that's average conversation. For yelling, go ahead and go a little bit louder. And for whispering, go a little bit quieter, but not too much. Like really the whispering and the Tom Hardy level stuff, that's the crucial thing where you need to dig in more with your editing and maybe some noise reduction when you're mixing to boost that stuff up, because those are the lines that people miss. People aren't doing the transatlantic, 1940s, 1950s, there's a single microphone and a sound stage and they're having to project their voice 20 feet like a stage play. They know there's a mic 5 inches from their mouth and they know they can mumble and whisper, and even with rain machines and fans and traffic and other stuff going on, that actors in modern cinema have a very subdued performance, and so clip gaining that stuff up will really help people. And the other thing that will help, this is not so much loudness but just intelligibility, is to not overprocess, and especially with clicks. We tend to look at clicks as dialogue editors as a bad thing, but clicks actually start a lot of consonants. So T's, P's, B's, some F's, and then the ends. Like if the sentence or word ends with a consonant, be careful just blanket, declicking something like this, because it's going to kill all the clarity of the dialogue. Even a mouth declick is going to take that stuff down. Even decrackle will take that stuff down. So I like to go frame by frame with removing clicks and only take out the clicks that need to be taken out, because I want to keep the ones that promote clarity. So clip gain your dialogue, clip gain your sound effects to be through the whole signal chain, then it's going to benefit from having the clip gain be a nice healthy level. And that all goes back to room calibration and having your monitor set at a level and then not touching the volume on your monitor controller or your interface. So loudness range, we kind of touched on that. I'd say try not to let the dialogue be more than 20. Really, 12 to 15 is probably more comfortable. And that's going to get, so with your dialogue being minus 24, that then leaves you 3 dB, actually more than that, because you're going to be swinging the pendulum the other way. It really gives you like 6 to 8 dB of headroom over that for loud music and loud sound effects. But what you don't want to do is have your dialogue average minus 27 and the action, sound effects, music, that stuff average like minus 12. And that's what I was going to draw on Sketchpad, is that, for example, let's do, I guess, pen. What is this going to do? This is, yeah, you can see that. Maybe I'll do a marker so it's bigger, or paintbrush. Sure. Okay. That's good. And then maybe like 20 picks. So let's say your dialogue is here, right? Dialogue, 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 nice and even. They yell here, they whisper here. So this is all good. And you measure that and it's minus 27. Wow, that's like super blurry. Let me redo that. Okay, dialogue, 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 yell, normal speech, whisper, normal speech. Okay, so this is minus 27 for dialogue. And now you mix the dialogue, you pre-dub it, it sounds good, and you're going to move on to music. So if this is reading minus 27 and then you have your music here, well, then they start to talk, so maybe you dip it, and then it goes down here for the whispering scene, and then it gets exciting right here. So maybe this now you're up to like minus 25. So you only have another, dB really to get to your spec of minus 24. So then you mix the sound effects. And generally, sound effects are popping in and out, unless there's like a jet or a long gun, gun battle. Maybe it spikes up here and then it goes back down. And then there's a little boom here and like this. So this is going to give you your minus 24 average. But what you don't want to do is this. That's up, and then this is up. So this is what happens with stuff that's too dynamic is, and actually that's like over 0. That's kind of funny. I'll bring all this stuff down. Stuff that's too dynamic is going to end up, you know, like now the loud stuff is way up here, and so your average for your program isn't -24, it's actually -20 now. And so what people will do is say, well, I'll just bring the dialogue down to like -30. And now you've got something that's way, 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 way too dynamic, where the peaks are -10 and the valleys are like, you know, -30. And your loudness range is like 25, 30 LUs. That's going to be too much. And it's not going to be a pleasant, oh, this is cool too. I can scale it. Yeah, this is actually a better representation. So you don't want to do that. If it's too dynamic, then like what's going to happen in this dip right here is people are going to be turning the volume up on their remote. And then when it gets to this, they're going to be turning it down. And that's like the worst possible experience, is to have a person remix your material because it's too dynamic. So try to keep stuff to where your mix is balanced, you're hitting the spec, and nothing is too loud or too quiet. And too loud or too quiet, how do you find that? What I like to do, what I did early on in my career, is I would route my mix through my playback screen that I put the video on, because it was normally a TV with speakers. And in the super old days, it was like one of those boxy TVs, like the Sony Trinitrons, the gray ones that are like 80 pounds, on a cart. We'd roll the cart out, patch in the audio to it, watch on the little screen and listen on the little speakers to see, you know, were we losing stuff? And we'd also do things like talk to each other and have maybe something on in the room so that it kind of mimicked a home environment where it's not 0 dB or 40 dB of ambient noise. There's like a dishwasher going, there's kids doing cartwheels in the background. And so mimicking that, even playing back something from your sound library, like an ambient sound of like a fan, or turning a fan on in your studio, or a heater or whatever, just get that ambient noise floor up and play it on small speakers. And it's going to show you in one playback of your show where it's too quiet, and maybe where it's too loud too, because small speakers have a different resonance, so stuff will pop out more. So if you're struggling with, well, how quiet or how loud, play it on a TV, play it on your phone. There's different ways to send audio to your phone. You can even upload the film to Dropbox and just watch it on your phone. Just pop that bad boy up on your bed. Go in your house, go to maybe don't go to a public area, but just take it out of your studio and play it on, just like you would if you were mixing a hip hop and people were like, how's that going to sound in my car with 5 18s in the trunk? Well, let's go take it to your car and see how much trunk rattle we get out of it. Do the same thing. If people are going to be watching on their phones, watch it on your phone. And make sure you watch it in an environment that's not totally quiet. They used to do that for, I think it was Skywalker did that with popcorn. They would play back popcorn munching sounds in their dub stage, because that's what you hear in a theater, to see like, is the quiet stuff below popcorn level, or is it speaking out over the top? So that is like getting a nice polished full mix that is sort of dynamic but not overly dynamic, where people are losing stuff or covering their ears, is to me like a huge, it's a mixture of technical skill and creativity. And that's also going to make sure that it's compatible across different formats. So we covered clip gain. Okay, so if you have a project that is mixed, for example, at -25, and now you've got to adjust it to a different spec. This will happen with like a broadcast ad, and now they want to go to web. You can do it a couple different ways. Probably the easiest way is in your routing for your stems and your bus creation. You can, let me turn this off. You can set up a bus with some compression on it, and that's what I've got with this web mix aux right here. So this is a, it's sent from all the stems. They go to a print master down mix and a print master aux, and then I've got this stereo web mix aux, which has a compressor on it. And this compressor, I've tweaked it enough to figure out the maths of, if I go from -24 through this bus with these compression settings, it's going to give me a -16. So it's 8 dB hotter, but it's also being compressed so that the peaks are not just chopped off with a limiter. They're like squished down with some compression. So here's the settings for that. -17, 2.3 to 1 ratio, slow knee, or sorry, middle of the range knee, pretty slow attack, 100 millisecond release, 100% wet mix with 3.2 dB of makeup gain. So anything that's over -17 is going to get knocked down by a ratio. Well, with the knee, it's not quite 2.3 to 1, but it'll get knocked down enough to where my broadcast mix will go through this bus and it's going to spit out a web mix, and I've got it recorded right here so that in one pass I can do both. I don't do web mix stems. I want them to use the broadcast stems because it's easier to go more compressed than less. So I spit that out and they can use it for whatever they want. So you can hit multiple formats. If you did do a mix and it was -25, for example, and you had to go to -24, a lot of the times what I'll do is I'll just go, I've got routing auxes here, and I'll just go to volume, and if it needs to come up one, well, you know, if there's a limiter on here, you can always bring the threshold down 1 dB, and that should boost it. No, because you'll have to bring the ceiling down too. But you can do it on the limiter by just changing the threshold and ceiling. If you're not tickling that limiter too hard, you can get away with just bringing up the level of the aux or the routing folder up 1 dB. So I do that because I don't want to go through and remix something that's already been approved. I just want to globally adjust stuff up or down, and I usually do that on the stem submasters to get that where it needs to be. So that's a good question. Level setting for comprehension, compression, de-essing, noise reduction, volume graphing. So we talked about clip gaining, but the mixing part of it that happens after the dialogue edit, people have all these tools. They've got EQ, they've got noise reduction, they've got de-essers, they've got compressors. All these can be used to either hurt or help comprehension in your loudness. And generally, compression, so EQ, you're going to shape the EQ based on what sounds good. If you're cutting too much highs, lows, or any band, comprehension is going to suffer. Most of the comprehension happens from like maybe 100 hertz up to about 2K, and then the clarity comes above that. But like the vowel shapes and everything are all mids and low mids. So you want to be careful cutting too much mids and low mids out. I see a lot of people grab 500 and bring it down automatically. That can be detrimental to clarity and getting your dialogue loudness up. And a lot of the power in the dialogue comes from this mid-range area. So then the next thing is de-essing. It's easy when something sounds very sibilant to just, like my de-esser is bypassed. I only grab it if I need to. But a lot of people start with the compressor on and it's already knocking down S's before they even listen to it. And certain languages like German and some of the Slavic languages, they really need the sibilants for you to understand what is being said. And English, maybe less so, but like just be careful with de-essing because you'll end up making stuff less intelligible. So I am a big proponent of starting with things bypassed and only enabling them if you need to. Compression is a dual-edged sword. On the one hand, compressing the signal will end up boosting the low stuff with your makeup gain to make it more intelligible. But the downside of compression is that it's knocking down the transients and the attacks. And the attacks are, for a lot of languages, where the understanding and clarity, you're really going from peak to peak with your ear to understand what's being said. And if you were to take out the consonants, it would be gibberish. So I like to go very light on compression and really only use it where it's needed. I do like a little bit of bus compression just to smush stuff together a little bit, especially if I'm doing boom and lav together. But track compression, just be very gentle with it. Listen to it with your ears. If you're not trained to hear compression, which is like the last skill that normally comes with ear training, just look at your gain reduction meter and see, you know, how far is this kicking down. Mine are bypassed right now, but you can check like on a bus.
Look, if you don't want to sell, I get it. The boss just said you needed the money.
So 3 dB of gain reduction is totally fine. But even that might be too much. So learn to use your ear. And the other downside with compression is that if you're struggling with getting your dialogue loud enough, check your compressor, because you can be working against your compressor and the compressor's fighting you to keep the dialogue quieter based on the threshold, and you're trying to bring it up with, you know, volume on your control surface, or if you're just writing in it with the mouse. So you can push into a compressor for a specific sound, but the compressor will actually hurt your intelligibility and your loudness, especially when you get to an action sequence where they're talking. If there's other tracks going on, you know, machine guns and jets and music that's all droney and stuff, ease up on the compressor, let the dialogue speak out over the top, because otherwise you're going to be fighting it, and the dialogue, you know, on this little doodle is going to be like this right here, this black part of the, I think you guys can see that, right? Yeah. It's going to be beneath the, you know, music and sound effects, and people are going to, if you don't want them to hear what they're saying, that's fine, but most of the time you want people to hear what they're saying. So let's see. Let me get through my outline, and then I will go back through and answer a bunch of questions. Again, member questions I'm going to focus on first, and then I'll go back through and do civilian questions. Okay, so loudness of other tracks. So after you've got your dialogue around -27 for the whole thing, then what I like to do next is mix the music in, and if the music is already pretty close, like the stems are balanced, then I will just do a VCA ride on the music. You can see that's what I've done here. And I'm riding this around the dialogue. Sometimes I'm dipping, sometimes I'm boosting, but I'm really listening to how it's interacting with the dialogue and making sure that I'm not overpowering the dialogue, and that I'm also not Mickey Mousing the mix to where you can hear like, oh, the music went up there, or it dipped here, you know, and that comes with practice. But generally, you kind of you don't want to tip the hand on the music level for shaping it around dialogue. I like to let the dialogue start, like let's say the dialogue starts right here, and then the dialogue starting informs the music to come down. So if the dialogue started here and you do this, with like orchestral music, you can do more dynamic rides and it just sounds fine because the music is dynamic. But for like industrial scores or electronic or rock or other instruments where it's more crunchy, compressed, if you do this, people are going to hear the mix and they're going to be like, oh, the music's coming down, somebody's going to talk. So I like to let the dialogue start. And that also works because most people, when they speak, the front of their sentence is loud, and by the end, they're out of breath, and it's much quieter. So that is kind of a clever way to hide some mix moves. And then sound effects can pop in and out, but sound effects and music being loud are like the two things that people complain about in a theater or at home the most, is that it's never that the dialogue was too, well, I shouldn't say it's never that the dialogue was too loud. It's often that these sound effects and music were overpowering the dialogue. And then sometimes if the dialogue is just cranked way up for like a loud yelling scene, they'll say, hey, that dialogue was too loud, it hurt my ears. But like the sound effects for like gunshots and punches and short instances where it's like just a little blip of loudness, those can be pretty loud. But it's when you get into the sustained sounds like an engine or a drone or a distorted guitar, or I'm trying to think of other stuff. a rumbling sound of like an earthquake, those long sustained sections are what are going to crank your loudness for the whole program way up. And it's also going to be difficult for people if they're that much louder than the other content. Okay, final delivery per format. So if you don't have a spec sheet in front of you and people are saying, I want you to mix this, just go for -24. Try to get the whole program to -24. Allow for some dynamics, but not so much that you're dipping too far below, like -31 for quiet scenes, not just dialogue, but whole scenes, or too much over, like I would say -14 for really loud scenes, like a heavy club music, you know, in a nightclub or something like that. Try to get your loudness range, the LU measurement on Insight, and I can, actually let me analyze, while I jabber, I'll analyze this. I think this will work. Sound fields, Insight. I'm like brain farting on my alphabet here. I think you guys will still be able to hear me while I analyze this, but let's see. We want continuous file, multi-input, and let's just see where it's at on the Netflix spec. Check 1, 2. Okay, you guys can still hear me while it's checking it out. Hopefully this fits in my box that I'm pitching of the loudness and everything. So I can already see the momentary goes up pretty high. And it looks like the dialogue might be a little too hot, but we'll see. So yeah, so just, it can be loud for short pieces, but you want to have stuff be pretty even. So let's see where this winds up. Okay. So the loudness, the dialogue is actually -24. So it's too hot, and the momentary is -8. So this is way too hot. Let's see what it is on 1770. But what's my argument for this? Well, I'm the director, and I said I wanted it to be exciting. So I made it really loud. Let me think. Oh, I was talking per format. So for cinema, there's no set standard. Like, you just mix it however you want. But keep in mind the final audience perspective of everything. For web, you're going to be shooting for around -16. For TV, you're going to be a -24. Yeah, so this is too hot. This whole mix is too hot. Look at that. So if I wanted to fit a spec with this, I would go back through and make it a lot less loud. But since I put this was for web, I'm okay with this. It's -18, it's close to the -16, and it's on the web, so that's my get out of jail free card on that. But web is going to be around -16, broadcast -24, and Netflix has its own spec, which is dialogue, gated. And then if you're operating on a professional level, they're going to give you a spec sheet to hit, so just hit the numbers on that. You can use Insight, you can use Ulian loudness meter. In Resolve, you can actually use, they have like, I think, loudness control to help you get within spec. And I have seen people use Izotope, the loudness, which don't do that. You want to get loudness right in your session, because you don't have to then process this file with Izotope. And then if they come back with a fix, you've got to reprocess it, and just get it right in Pro Tools so that you can make adjustments on your buses or on your tracks. Okay, so I think I covered all the stuff I wanted to. I'm going to go all the way back to the top and go through member questions. Did you only take one shoe off? Nope, both my shoes are off. Okay, covered that. Being able to, this is post audio for media, says, being able to change from program. Oh, I should probably change this to live chat, huh? There we go. From program to dialogue gated with Insight is a huge plus. Yeah, it is. It's really good. I hear -37 to -31 LUFS dialogue is good for theatrical mixes. I'll go back through the non-member questions. Let me just focus on member stuff first. Kudos to Radio Shack SPL meter. Really love mine too. Yeah, if you don't have one of those, it's like It's just like a golden cow. Like, you gotta have it. I feel so called out. This is giving so many aha moments. Great video. I'd like to learn how you designed, built your room, please. Room shape, absorption panels. I kind of covered that in like a little, I just shot it with my phone. So you can check that video out. But basically, it's a shed. it's a 12 by 16 shed. But I drew it on a piece of paper, sketched it out, every stud location, the dimensions. It has about 12-foot high ceilings in the middle, vaulted ceilings. That's to allow the sound to propagate up and not just sound like a little bedroom. And then I've got tuned bass traps that I built out of lumber and insulation. So everything was built by hand. And do that. Like, if you need a space to work in, I needed this to get out of my house. So I built it to leave the house for the family and get out of the house, have some quiet. And it's nice and quiet. It's not too dead. And I can just kind of work out here all day. Do you keep balance tweaking all the main VCAs? Yes, that is, you can see my session here. I do a lot of VCA work. I don't normally automate the volume on the routing folders. I leave that flat so that I can do global tweaks if I need to make a format change or whatever. So VCAs are the way to go. And if you want a template that has VCAs in it, I've got one on my website. A bunch of regular. Okay, here's another member question. How do you reference levels for surround mixes that will automatically fold down to stereo on streaming platforms? I always monitor the stereo mix, and I will often, like I said, route it to my TV here in my studio. Sometimes I'll check on headphones because some people do listen to movies on headphones. So that's how I do that. Let's see. Hey Thomas, I use Audacity. Do you know why the spectrum graph or my output level doesn't work on my Pro Q3? I don't. I don't know much about Audacity. This is Hyphen Lou says, apart from loudness, I sometimes find my near field mix benefits from a slight high frequency boost. Have you noticed this in near field mixes, and how do you handle it? What I find generally is that if I go from a dub stage to near fields, it's actually maybe too bright because of the X curve or the horn loaded drivers not really being good for sound over 10K. So for me, it'd be the opposite, that it's too bright. But it could also be, I don't know how you're mixing your dialogue or other stuff. Okay, so any other member questions, like drop them and I will jump down and focus on them. And let me look through non-member questions. I've got 5 minutes. I have a ton of work to do today, so I'm super thankful for it, but it also means that I've kind of, at 9, I've got to jump off of here. Okay, that's good. Spider-Verse last year was too quiet worldwide and they had to send a patch DCP. Yeah, see, that's the thing. Like, it sounds good in a quiet dub stage with giant speakers in a huge room, but then even going to a theater can be different because not all theaters are calibrated very well, or even bodies in the room can change how the sound propagates. I hear -37 to -31, the LUFS dialogue is good for theatrical mixes. I don't know, maybe. How quiet are they talking? If you're doing that and then your action scenes are -12, it's going to be very difficult to keep people in the theater. Let's see. ATSC has a great -24 dBFS speech sample. Yeah, it's good to have like stuff that sounds good as a reference and play it in your studio and just set it and forget it. Set your monitor level, and then every time you work on something, just don't touch it. just work at a calibrated level, even for dialogue editing. Let's see. I think a loudness spec for theatrical, even though I would get flayed for this, I think at this point it's a good idea. Okay. LFE is bigger issue. Yeah. LFE is always tricky in small rooms. Is minus 27 average conversation or also for moments like yelling? I would say average for program to include yelling, to include whispering, because you don't want your average conversation to be minus 27 and then drop down to like minus 40 and then go up to minus 12. That's going to be too dynamic. Can I use program loudness for dialogue leveling? Oh, yeah. Yeah, noisy dialogue it gives those gates a problem. There you really have to use your ears. Like, we don't have machines that can do better than our ears. So, yeah. See, Chris says you can go as loud as you want with FX and music, but you're always anchored with your dialogue. That's the problem I'm talking about, is that stuff is too loud. And I'm just going to turn it, or I'm going to turn it down, or I'm going to enable like the highest dynamic range compression on my soundbar in my living room to squash your mix, because I don't want my kids to be woken up and I don't want stuff shaking off my walls. So if you want to mix that way, go for it, but you're just putting it in the hands of the consumer to remix your overly dynamic material. So let's see. Do I use an SPL meter to calibrate speakers to dialogue work? Yep, definitely. They're just calibrated and they stay where they're at. Yeah, and an SPL meter, C-weighted. You want it slow response time, C-weighted. If speakers calibrated 62 SPL, then dialogue is average 62 SPL. It won't, because the tone is going to be set to minus 20. So the dialogue is going to average like less than 82, but more than 62. It's probably going to be like around 74-ish. But don't just sit there with an SPL meter while you're dialogue editing. That's not good. I don't use an SPL, to measure dialogue. I use it to measure pink noise coming out of the speakers. And then once those are set, then I just clip gain to the room. Dialogue should not hurt your ears. Yep. Let's see. Frequency range matter as well as levels. Yes, that's a good point. Like, a lot of the loudness comes from the mid-range, and the low and high end are just feel, and it can be too sharp, but very loud points like in the club should be minus 14. Minus 14 is kind of like, once I get to there on a sequence, I know I'm verging into the painful territory for people, because if you're at 82 calibrated, that means you're playing back stuff at like 92 dB, which is pretty loud. So, yeah. Why minus 16 for web and not minus 14? Minus 14 is just, like, you have almost no headroom then for peaks. So I don't care if YouTube normalizes stuff 2 dB. That's fine. Let's see. Don't use Izotope for final check. Got it. Yeah, I mean, just use the Pro limiter. It's fine. Any tips to dB true peak? Yeah, just do -2 unless you get another spec. NBC used to be -12, and then they went to -6. I don't know if they're still at -6. TV is great because, like, they actually they seem to process the mixes as they air, and it limits the dynamic range, and they've been doing that for forever. So that's why TV is nice, because even if the mixes aren't like constrained, like they're too dynamic, the broadcast chain that happens as they go out just squashes them down. So, yeah. Strange question, but any advice for sound mixing for folks with tinnitus? Yes. learn to live with it. Maybe I missed it. What's a good film or films to reference that you would consider a good reference mix? Just pick movies you like. Everybody has different tastes, so I'm not too big on that. Like most of the films that come out are mixed really well. There's a couple that get heat for the mixes being too dynamic or odd in the name of art, but you know, they're doing it for a reason. So pretty much anything that comes out is going to be aces. Have used the Pro Tools stock plugin Pro Limiter Analyzer. Let me see. I feel like I have. Let me see what you're talking about. Let's see. If you're talking about this guy, yeah, this is good. This gives you a history on stuff. I don't think there's anything other than this. But yeah, this is fine. You can reset it. This has replaced Insight for me just because I kind of have my room calibrated to where I can hit the spec without looking at meters. Okay, a couple more questions and then I got to get to work. When I normalize a song at -1 dB, for example, I sometimes, whatever that word is, higher true peak. Do you have an explanation about that? Yeah, because it's not normalizing to true peak. It's normalizing to the digital peak, which doesn't deal with perception. True peak deals with like the perception and the possible playback level. Like there's a whole scientific thing behind it. I probably misspoke about that. Do you band limit your pink noise when calibrating your near fields? Nope, full range. I use the Dolby pink noise, which might already be band limited. I don't remember, but you just Google Dolby pink noise -20 and you'll find what I'm talking about. So I think that's it. How's my battery on my lab? It's still good. So I'm gonna sign off here. I've got a bunch of stuff to edit today, so I am really glad that you guys were with me to go over this. I think I went over everything I wanted to on loudness for film and TV. So if you have any questions about this, you can drop them now or later if you rewatch this, and I'll try to answer as many as I can. And I'll probably touch on this again at some point. Huge thank you to channel members for supporting the channel. I try to give you guys first dibs on, you know, questions, and I try to give out some like sound effects and discounts and, you know, like answer more of your questions because you guys are really you're really helping me out by supporting the channel, and anybody who watches is supporting too, but members kind of go like the extra level. So I will continue to try to support you guys back. If you have any ideas for that, let me know. Try to do a members only Q&A soon. And yeah, loudness is super important, so it just takes practice and some experience and calibrated room and time. Don't skip clip gaining your dialogue or sound effects so that it's hitting the plugins at the right level, and don't skip on room treatment and calibrating your monitors. Those are super important things, and without a calibrated environment, you're really shooting in the dark for all your mixing decisions. So yeah, if you're having to mix on headphones or something like that, always check on at least stereo monitors for not absolute level, but relative level for things. That's the big drawback with headphones, is relative level of, is this sound louder than the previous sound, and balancing because you don't have the physical air between your ears and the drivers. So yeah, and then ask production for spec sheets. Anytime you're hired for something, see if they have a spec. You can ask them where this is going. I'll ask that a lot. Like, is this going just to web? Is it going to Netflix? Is it going to Amazon? Is it going to just your website and it's going to die there? Is it going to a film festival? So once you get that information, it lets you know how loud stuff needs to be. And yeah, good luck on your journey with mixing. Hopefully you guys have a great week and you get some work done, get some time with your families and friends to relax. and I will see you guys next week. I have to think of a topic for next week, so if you have any requests or ideas, go ahead and drop it in the chat or comment on a video or whatever, and I will try to tailor this weekly live stream for what you guys are looking for. So I won't roast your ears with more Mr. Rogers singing. I'm just going to say goodbye, and yeah, have a good week. I'll see you later.